President Trump set the refugee cap at just 7,500, the lowest in U.S. history, and will allocate most spots to white Afrikaners from South Africa, reversing years of policy.
This is just astounding. It is incredibly cruel and inhumane, but it's not surprising given the other cruel and inhumane policies of this administration, cutting off life-saving medicines to the poorest of the poor abroad, or cruelly treating in an inhumane way suspected undocumented immigrants. But this is unbelievably cruel. The refugee program has existed for many decades, since the 1980s, and it is designed to provide refuge for the worst victims of violence and oppression abroad. And it has been a humanitarian beacon for the world. Trump has knocked it down to 7,500 per year. The lowest previously was, of course, under his first administration, 15,000 a year. And in his last year, President Biden welcomed some 100,000 refugees. And we get the same mythology coming out of this administration that they're using for their crackdown on undocumented immigrants. The country can't afford these refugees. They're disrupting and undermining our communities. Not a shred of evidence, not an iota of proof for that. And what evidence we do have shows none of that is true. It's just fabricated to justify the cruelty of this administration. So you're only letting in a trickle of refugees. And in that small number, who are they primarily letting in or trying to let in, Sam?
White Afrikaners.
White Afrikaners. You know, Donald Trump has said, I'm the least racist person in the world. Never one to underplay his own fabricated virtues. Yet time and again, he has expressed and indicated that he is filled with racist prejudice, among so many other things, dining, with notorious racists, calling black women low IQ and dumb, saying Kamala Harris just turned black for political purposes, calling black African nations S-hole nations. I can go on. But this is one of the most blatantly racist initiatives we've seen from Donald Trump and this administration. Sam, are white Afrikaners in South Africa really victims of genocide, like the 6 million Jews that Hitler killed?
Of course not.
Not even close. First of all, throughout a long history, what were the white Afrikaners doing in South Africa?
Colonizing
and imposing one of the worst systems of racial oppression, really until the 1990s. This is not ancient history of what white Afrikaners were doing to the black overwhelming majority in South Africa. One of the cruelest systems of racial oppression and discrimination that they're only forced to end, by the international community. They didn't do so voluntarily, and they remain the elite. They're about 9% of the South African population. And while estimates are hard to come by, there are estimates which say they control over 60% of the wealth in South Africa. And in terms of violence, yes, some white South African farmers have been victims of homicide, but homicide, unfortunately, is rampant in South Africa, has one of the highest homicide rates in the world. And proportionately, Sam, who are the worst victims of violence in South Africa?
Black South Africans.
Black people. I mentioned the white Afrikaners are 9% or so of the population, and they suffer less than 1% of the homicides. Less than 1% of the homicides. Those who care, the only justification, and it's not really a justification, excuse that Trump could possibly muster. I want white people.
That?
No, of course not. But that's really what this is all about.
I think it's really all about Trump and his MAGA movement for, a decade now have been trying to push this idea that somehow white people are victims in America and now abroad. And
Absolutely.
I think this is just to reinforce that sort of strange rhetoric they're trying to push, that, whites are part of some sort of great
left-wing conspiracy. Yeah. They've been blatant about that.
Right. And this is just part of that narrative.
Yeah. That white people, particularly white Christians, who, by the way, control most of our politics and our economy, are somehow the victims, and minority peoples who, have suffered slavery, Jim Crow, ongoing discrimination in healthcare, education, jobs, are somehow privileged. And they are victimizing white people, particularly white Christians.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at any of the data across countries like America or South Africa, I mean, it's very clear, right? It's like, if you look at poverty rates, housing, education, wealth, health, like it's black. It's, no pun intended, it's very black and white.
Yes. And of course, while he's prioritizing as refugees these people who don't need refuge, what is he doing to the rest of Africa? Cutting back needlessly for no reason, doesn't have but a minuscule effect on the budget, life-saving medicines and aid to the most vulnerable people in Africa. So he's abandoning the people who really need help and prioritizing the people who don't need help. Exactly what he is doing right here in the United States. And of course, advocates for refugees are understandably appalled at what Trump is doing. The president of Global Refuge, one of the major national groups that have worked traditionally with the U.S. government to resettle refugees, said, Mr. Trump has, quote, and this I think is a way understatement, Mr. Trump, quote, lowers our moral standing. Imagine that, Sam.
No, Trump? I don't buy it. He's such a morally high-standing man.
He would tell you that. I'm the least racist, the most moral person in the world.
And actually, I don't know if he would say he's the most moral person in the world, but he would. I
don't know if he's actually said that, but if asked, he probably would. Maybe, or close to it. He says he knows more about debt than anyone. He knows more about war than the generals.
Right. That is true. He does say that.
He does say all kinds of things.
But the other day, he was on Air Force One talking about whether he would get to heaven or not, and he seemed a little bit self-deprecating in that conversation.
I'm not sure he even believes in a heaven or hell.
Well,
this guy has almost never seen the inside of a church. We know he hasn't read the Bible. He couldn't come up with one verse from the Bible when asked. I think when he did his photo op in front of the church near the White House after they drove away the protesters, he might have been holding the Bible upside down.
Did he?
There's a report on that. I'm not certain.
Okay.
I'm not certain, but that has been reported.
Anyways, there's no doubt that what he's doing here is not only illogical, full of lies, but also morally bankrupt.
And consistent with what he's been doing here in the United States.
Right.
The other thing he's done here in the United States is he's tried to revoke the temporary protected status for victims of terror and violence and war abroad, which means they would, have to go back to the most dangerous, inhumane kinds of situations, including lots of women and children. I'll conclude by, another statement which says a lot from the president of Global Refuge. Quote, at a time of crisis in countries ranging from Afghanistan to Venezuela to Sudan and well beyond, concentrating the vast majority of admissions on one group undermines the program's purpose as well as its credibility. I think these are all, she's being careful. These are all understatements. But, the point is, where are the worst victims of violence, poverty, terrorism, disease? They're not the white people in South Africa. They're black and brown people in Africa and around the world. The very people that Trump is trying to toss out of the United States with his crackdown on undocumented immigrants, with his efforts to remove temporary protective status, the very people he doesn't want to let in. He wants America to be as white as possible, and his policies are so patently designed to achieve that end. Thanks for watching our video. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and become a member today.